Hi besties, only Kimmy here. As you can see, my little Ellis is here in his waistcoat and his tie, and he's been sitting here looking out the window with his little duck that his Auntie Sue brought him. That Sue drank water, bless her. She sent him that for Christmas, which was really sweet. But I've come on to do just a little bit more reading of Mattie because we really are getting near to the end of the book now. I'll just show you the picture I showed you last. See little hedgehog there with his poorly little leg. Okay, I'll start up. Here we go. The woman from the house was hanging out her washing when she saw Mattie dragging herself across the onion patch towards the flower pot, and she realised that the hedgehog had been injured. She thought at first that Mattie had been run over by a car. The injured hedgehog crawled painfully into the flower pot, and the woman brought her husband, who put his hand into the hay to lift Mattie out. She was frantic with pain and fear and snapped at the man's hand. Then she tried to curl up, but she was in such pain that she was unable to do so. The man carefully lifted her out, managing to avoid being bitten by the terrified hedgehog. And the woman tried to straighten the injured leg as gently as she could, while Mattie lay on her side, panting, limp with exhaustion. The upper bone of the leg had snapped, and the end of it had pierced the skin. Already flies were settling on the wound. The hedgehog seemed at last to be unconscious, so the woman pulled the broken leg straight and sponged the wound with a mild disinfectant. She then set the leg in a small padded splint, which she bound firmly in place with strips of band-aid. By then Mattie was breathing more easily and seemed more comfortable. After a while she regained consciousness, and the woman gave her a saucer of bread and milk, literally laced with brandy. After a moment's hesitation, the hedgehog discovered that she was ravenously hungry, and holding her injured leg stiffly behind her, she ate her fill. The fumes of the brandy rose to her head, and soon she was sleeping deeply. So the man picked her up and put her into the flower pot, seeing that she was covered with hay in case her injury caused her to feel the cold. Mattie slept all that day and all that night. Then, early the next morning, she crawled to the back door of the house to see if any bread and milk had been put out for her. The woman fed her and tenderly carried her back to the flower pot. It was obvious that the hedgehog would not be able to find her own food for several weeks. So the man decided to make her a hutch, so that she could live beside the house where he and his wife could look after her. The hutch had a hinged roof and a screen door with a narrow entrance to protect its inmate from cats. The walls and roof were made snug and waterproof with roofing felt, and the woman filled Mattie's new home with hay. They put the hedgehog in, and she burrowed into the hay and went to sleep. Mattie soon got used to the hutch and accepted it as her home. Every morning and every evening the woman brought a dish of food to the door and called Mattie's name. And here is the hutch. Let me get it in a position so you can see. And there's the hutch, and there's Mattie outside. The hedgehog quickly learnt that the call meant food and came as soon as she heard it. The splints remained securely fastened to her leg, so the woman did not touch them. As the days went by, it became clear that Mattie was no longer in pain, although she was still unable to use the injured leg. She spent most of her time sleeping and eating, and the woman found that she liked a variety of foods. But junket, baked custard, eggs and sour milk were her favourites. Mattie also liked meat, either raw or cooked, cheese, bacon rind, currants and sultanas. She often ate the scraps left over from meals, and she was very fond of fatty things such as suet pudding. She did not try to hunt at night, but she often crawled about on the concrete surrounds of the house during the day, picking up ants and other small insects. Early in September, the woman cut the splints away from the hedgehog's injured leg. The wound had healed completely, and there was just a small lump where the bone had not set straight. Mattie carefully put her feet to the ground and limped back to her hutch. The mended legs seemed stiff and unmanageable at first, but as time went on, the hedgehog found that she could use it again, although she walked stiffly for the remainder of her life. The time for hibernation arrived, but Mattie seemed quite content to stay in her hutch, and as the weather grew colder, she collected leaves which had fallen from the sycamore tree and carried them mouth by mouthful into the hutch. When the nights grew cold and frosty, she burrowed deep into the leaves and hay and curled herself up to sleep the winter away. Meanwhile, her latest litter had scattered. Some were living in the gardens and some were living in the double hedge along the lane, where they hibernated in nests lined with grass and leaves. The papas grass in Amelia Dart's garden was growing very untidy, so she decided to set fire to it. As the flames spread through the tinder dry grass, two sleepy young hedgehogs rushed out with their bristles on fire. Sadly, they died of shock. There was nothing Amelia could do for them. The rest of Mattie's litter lived through the winter to wander across the fields when spring came. They mated and raised families and lived and died as hedgehogs always have. Mattie awoke early in April. At the beginning of her hibernation she had measured 10 inches from head to tail and had weighed 1 pound 13 ounces. Her length had not changed, but she had lost 10 ounces in weight. She had lived on her fat during her winter sleep. She ate enormously, and soon rolls of fat could be felt under the brown wool of her stomach. She followed the woman from the house to turn her on her back and tickle her stomach, and she liked having her snout and forehead stroked. But she made it quite clear that these liberties could only be taken with her permission. She was content to live in her hutch, but she seemed determined to retain all of her rights as a wild animal. She did not always answer to her name, and she sometimes slept away from her hutch for a night or two. But she never missed going to the back door of the house for her bread and milk. She did not make that year, although she hunted over the gardens in company with several other hedgehogs. When summer came, the woman often sat in a deck chair on the concrete surrounds of the house. Sometimes she brought her knitting out with her, and Mattie would often creep from behind her hutch to crouch in the shade of the deck chair. She liked to play with one of the balls of wool. She would trundle it to and fro until strands were tangled round and round her bristles. Then she would stand still, waiting impatiently to be freed. Mattie liked the sunshine, but it seemed to hurt her eyes. Her sight, like that of all hedgehogs, was poor by day, but keen at night. When she sat in the sunshine, she would wrinkle her brows over her eyes, trusting to her sense of smell to warn her of any danger that may approach. Her face bore an expression of meek resignation. When her food was put out, Mattie would put up her bristles and threaten any strange hedgehogs that came near her dish, and she would only allow any other animal to approach her hutch. I said that wrong, didn't I? And I apologise for that. And she would not allow any other animal to approach her hutch. She gave the people of the house such affection as was in her nature, but it was clear that she regarded them mainly as sources of food and comfort. She knew that the call of Mattie meant that some tidbit was being held out for her to take. When the woman stroked her snout and stomach, she felt again the warmth of her mother's tongue licking her, and she was soothed and comforted. The scent trails in the garden brought back memories of other summers, and the smell of the cows in the meadow spoke to her of milk. She did not remember the many young hedgehogs she had brought into the world, and the pains that she had suffered were either forgotten or remembered only as a slight discomfort. Right, I will turn off for now, girls, but I will read you more. You can be assured of that. Kisses from me and kisses from Ellis, and we'll be back in a short moment to read you some more. Thank you. Love you, besties. Take care.